Hi everyone, welcome to Lead a Horse to Water, the equine training and behaviour podcast. I'm your host, Trudy Dempsey. I'm pleased to have you here, and I'm sorry that I haven't been very good at posting new episodes recently. I hope that's going to change, and I plan to try and get back to my usual pace of one per month. Definitely got some recordings coming up with some wonderful guests in the near future, so look out for those. But I'm also going to be doing some dives into people's questions and little topics that appeal to me as I am in today's episode. But before we get on to that, which is the answer to a question that somebody sent me on a YouTube video of mine, first of all, I want to mention, if you're listening to this and you haven't already signed up for my Understand Clicker Training for Horses course at Understand Horses, that ends its early bird price today. It's $2.99 for 6 weeks. It's the most amazing value. Not only do you get a lot of course content, lectures, and we have a forum, and we have a couple of Zoom meetings within that 6 weeks as well. Not only do you get that, but you get to train, show me your training, show me how you're getting on. I will give you feedback, and I will also give you video voiceover feedback on that training. So for $2.99, that's incredible value. It will go up to $3.99 if you're buying it tomorrow, but watch out for that coming up again. It will come up again next year. It's likely it will only run once a year though in future, because now that I have my certified professional trainers course, which is halfway through now, that's why I've been so busy and finding it so hard to get episodes recorded. We are over halfway. I am learning so much from the students. They are an incredible bunch, and if you would like to be part of the group for next year, do contact Understand Horses info at understandhorses.com, because you can get put on the wait list to be notified when that course goes live for sale. It's likely to start March, April time next year. And so that is a certified 20-week professional trainers course. If you want to look at how you train professionally with positive reinforcement techniques, that's the one for you. It's a broad course. There is a lot of information and there's a lot of work for you to do on it. So join us if you think that's the one for you. I wanted it to be the sort of course that you came out of the end of feeling, actually, I can do this, and other people knowing that you've got that knowledge, that depth of knowledge. I mean, we are going deep. So join me for that one. That's next year. Get put on that wait list. But also, if you'd like to know how I train, either sign up for the Understand Clicker Training Horses course, which comes up in September. That begins that 6-week course. That would give you a good idea of how I train and whether you'd like to train the way I do. It also is possible for you to join that as an auditor for £175. You get to watch everybody's training and you get to see the course material. You can't post training of yourself. You need to be a full student for that, but it's still incredible value for an awful lot of learning. I also want to mention, and this is an event that's very close to my heart, the 9th, 10th August this year, we are going to be at Nottingham Trent University with Understand Horses Live. This is an incredible weekend. It's such a great feeling between people, being able to chat and discuss and learn for that weekend. I learned so much from my fellow presenters. Come along and join us. That is an amazing event that you really want to be at. And yeah, I've had a busy year this far. I have been over in Colorado at the IAABC Foundation conference. That was amazing. As I say, my pro course is halfway and underway now. I also have had the opportunity to be voted onto the board of directors at the IAABC, which I'm thoroughly proud of, and I'm going to do my very best for the equine world while I'm there for my 2-year tenure. So thank you to anyone that voted for me. I'm in there, and I'm really hoping to make a difference for the equine world. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the question that I was asked, and I think it's a really interesting question. This was posed to me after I answered a question that was posed during the World Horse Welfare webinar that I gave, and you can find that through the World Horse Welfare, either their website, or you can find it on their YouTube channel, where I was talking about learning theory, carrot or the stick. I think we've moved on a bit from sticks, but yeah. And so this was a question, a bit of a hangover from a question. I wasn't quite sure part of the question what they were really asking about, and so They very kindly come back and cleanly explain to me what they were talking about. And so it was a question about whether the ability to relax and to stop training or stop working could be used as a reinforcer for training or doing something. So we know how reinforcement works. Okay, we add something or we take something away. That means that in future that thing is going to be more likely to be offered. Positive reinforcement, we add something. Negative reinforcement, we take something away. So we're all pretty clear on that. I don't think I need to go into that. There are many other episodes where we can have a look at that. I think what's interesting in this case, because this person is asking particularly about a horse that would be in harness. So you're sitting behind the horse, you're not on the horse, you can't reach forward and feed that horse. And so it's an interesting one, but it's one that I think is worth digging into because of the process. Now, first of all, I want to say that I am not a driving expert, and I certainly know very little, almost nothing about sulky driving, but I do know that this person is trying to make a difference in that world, and that to me is thoroughly amazing. The fact that somebody can think about using positive reinforcement in a world where it truly doesn't exist. I mean, for most of us that's the case, isn't it? You know, it's not a case that we can be drawing on the role models in the world of dressage, of show jumping. There are very few people that are using positive reinforcement and aiming to use that as their main focus in terms of training. We know it's not a method, we know it's not a system, it's just a way of reinforcing the behavior and getting more of it. But I think we can safely call ourselves positive reinforcement based trainers. I think that's good enough for us going forwards, and meaning that we're looking at those specific ways of encouraging behavior. So this person, I love that they're trying to bring that to a new world, because it's hard enough to do it in a world where you feel supported by the people that you surround yourself with. So is it potentially possible that we could drive a horse? Let's look at it in its simplest term. And I'm going to make this super, super simple just to get my head around it. So I'm thinking about this as I'm talking, which is a way I often address things, rather than take lots of notes and think about it for hours. Tie myself up in knots. You're hearing me tie myself up in knots. You're hearing me work through this in my brain in real time. And I think that's really important for me on this podcast, that I'm really open and very clear with you about where I stand with things. So let's think about it in terms of, we're at point A and we need to get to point B. We are behind the horse, whether that's in harness, attached to some sort of carriage, some sort of sulky, whatever it is. We are behind the horse and we need to get from point A, and the reinforcement potential is at point B. Now, what could we put at point B that might be reinforcing for the horse to have moved from A to get to B? Well, we can think in very simple terms. I can talk about a carrot. I can stick a carrot at B, and if the horse likes carrots and they walk from A to B and they get a carrot, the chances are they'll keep walking from A to B to get a carrot. The problem for people who are driving, I think, is almost in the mindset of thinking around, how do we get there? How do we go from that short distance from A to B? Because I'm talking, halfway across an arena, I'm talking 10, 20 meters maximum. I'm not talking about long distances. So we know we can build that up from the very first step the horse takes, and they get food for that. Yeah, we'll be up and down from our sulky regularly to try and administer that positive reinforcement. But it's worth it, because in the end we can go all the way from A to B, 20 meters, and the horse gets their positive reinforcement at the end of it. Now, of course, that positive reinforcement might not necessarily be a carrot. It could be any type of food that the horse enjoys. It might be scratches. It might be stroking if the horse really finds tactile tension reinforcing, but we'd need to know that for sure. Same with scratching. We can't know until we know whether we see more of the behavior or not. So the potential to do it, because if we can do it over 20 meters, we could do it over, I don't know what the length of the sulky race is, but we could do it over any length of race. What we're talking about is putting things together in a pattern so that the end point where we get the reinforcement is the final point of the reinforcement routine, and everything is back chained from that. So we're talking about creating a pattern behind that, and then we go to it and they get their reinforcement. So that wasn't actually the question. The question wasn't, can we do it? The question was, could we use a certain type of reinforcement? So could we use relaxation? So we walk from point A to point B and we let the horse relax. We say, there you go, there's your reinforcer. We could even attach a marker to it. Click, and we'll just hang around here for a while. Let's just hang around here and do nothing for a while. And in my mind, I think, well, that's just pressure and release. That's just negative reinforcement. We ask them to do something, we put the pressure on, and then we take it off. But this is more complex. We're going 20 meters. The negative reinforcement happened really early on. So the negative reinforcement, if it was trained correctly, happens right at the beginning when we ask the horse, hopefully verbally, that's what I would be training, verbally to walk on. The horse walks on, and in the early days we'd be marking that and finding some way to feed that or scratch that, whatever our reinforcer of use is going to be. The trouble is then we're talking about adding something further down the line, and a lot of you at this point are going to be shouting at me. I think you probably do that quite a lot. And you're going to be saying, yeah, pre-Mac. And pre-Mac is something I've spoken about on the podcast before. Pre-Mac is the potential for something that is enjoyed more by the learner to be reinforcing for something they enjoy less. So if I have to do my office work, the reinforcer for that might be taking a walk with my dogs. It might be training with my dogs. It's something that I enjoy more than sitting down doing my paperwork, which I just detest. I don't mind recording podcasts and I don't mind recording videos and doing voiceovers, but if it's boring old bookwork, accountant stuff, then I need something to keep me going. So we're looking at that in that whole sort of pre-Mac thing. Now I get shouted at for this one as well, because pre-Mac is just about reinforcement. It just happened that pre-Mac came before we knew enough about positive reinforcement. So his ideas were amazing and they were really out there and pretty new. This idea that doing something nice after you do something that you didn't really want to do is going to make it likely that you'll do the less attractive thing to begin with. So people will often ask me about this. So if I lunge for 10 minutes and then I put my horse out in the field, isn't that pre-Mac? I think we just need to go back into learning theory and work out what we really understand by it, because no, that isn't pre-Mac. Not for me anyway. Pre-Mac is very definitely something that coincides with the thing you did. It's very attached to it, not 20 minutes of schooling and then you go and get put in the field. I think it's much more specifically reinforcement than that. I know people like to think of pre-Mac as very separate to reinforcement, but for me, I see pre-Mac as being reinforcement before we really knew what reinforcement was all about and the technicalities that came along with that as we got into Skinner and people that have followed on from Skinner and before him, to be fair. So yeah, the idea that we could walk from A to B and then we could let the horse have a relax, it depends how relaxing it is. Does the horse know that that's associated? So the idea of putting a marker to it, I guess, potentially, and we could play around with the idea of, so we start off at A, we use our cue, and at the beginning we mark that first step, and that first step means they get to relax. But how relaxing would relaxing be if you've only taken one step, and how understandable for the horse would it be? I mean, I think anything is trainable, so I'm not going to say I couldn't train it in an animal somehow, but I'm not sure of the benefit, and I'm not sure as to whether it would be reinforcing enough. So you could spend a lot of time. This is such a lovely conundrum, and the more I'm thinking about it, the more it's opening up more discussion in my head, and I hope it is for you too. So we have this idea in theory that as long as the horse finds it reinforcing, as long as it's something that they will work to get more of, then we could use it. So I'm going to say the theory is if you could encapsulate that behavior, that thing, that relaxation, and hereby I think is the problem, here's the sting in the tail. A horse finds it very hard to relax when they're kind of at work, as it were. And I think that is the problem for me. It's hard enough around food reinforcers to keep that relaxation, but when you're not actually offering anything, or potentially you might be offering some food further down the line, how much can we expect the horse to relax and find that reinforcing? So to the question directly, that really will depend. If you want to use relaxation and put a marker to it, I believe anything is possible. would the horse genuinely understand that that was what they were getting as their reinforcer? Would it be reinforcing for the horse? I'm not entirely sure. So what I'm going to do, and also right at the beginning, we're using pressure possibly to create that cue, that forwards. Maybe we're using a tap, or maybe we're using a leg at the beginning, or a little gentle sort of chivvy along with our hand behind the horse. Whatever it is, we are using negative reinforcement. So we are using pressure and release at the beginning, but the release is not a moment of relaxation, not for me. It's a whole different thing, and it's a whole different thing that the horse would want to try and work for or to relieve. So I think we have to be careful, because that relief, that's releasing pressure, is a relief, because for it to work as reinforcement, the horse has to find it aversive in the first place. So we can't assume that that pressure isn't in some way aversive. It has to be if we're getting more of the behaviour. Therein lies another tale, because how good it is at reinforcing when we're using negative, I'm uncertain. And I think often we stray into the areas of positive punishment, where we're adding something to force the horse technically to offer it. I think it's muddy water. So I am going to, though, because I'm so thrilled that somebody wants to think through this process, I am going to suggest a way that I think you can do it. And it's a way that I use with long reining all the time. And there are two slightly different routes to this. The first route is what I call my behaviour builder system. And that is for people who really aren't yet totally on board with the ins and outs of clicker training. So it's all a bit technical and a bit hard for them, because they're not really sure about when you mark and when you feed and all that stuff. And it is difficult. We must stop kidding ourselves that this is just easy. You can do some really simple things like touching a target, but you can't get into the intricacies of chaining, back chaining, sequencing, and all these ways of reducing reinforcers that we have in a positive way for the horse, that the horse can understand and can keep building behaviour. We can't do that with limited knowledge about how to. So first of all, deciding whether you are a technical person or whether you're not yet. So if you're not a technical person, you're going to be using my behaviour builder system, and that means we're just going to back chain from a feeding point. For a lot of people, that's going to be a bucket. So if you're long reining, I'm going to start this in hand. If you're practicing ready to start your horse in a sulky, you're going to do exactly the same thing. You are going to walk your horse to a bucket and drop food in that bucket. And you're going to increase the distance that you walk to that bucket and drop food in it. And then you are going to move your position. You are going to put yourself behind the horse eventually. So begin with, you're at the horse's side, maybe a little in front if you had to be. Prefer you weren't, but if you have to be. And you're not going to be pulling on any reins. If you're at the stage where you have to pull your horse to get them to go, behaviour builder is definitely not for you. You need to go back and investigate why your horse doesn't want to come and do things with you, because in my experience there are very few horses, well, there are none. I don't think there are any horses that wouldn't come with you to do something if all their needs are met and they don't have any problems. That's just my take on it. So if your horse isn't willing to come along with you for the party, then I think you need to start looking at why that might be, and looking at those underlying things. And of course, that always starts, and I talk about this all the time, I'm not going to miss another opportunity. That starts with us looking at pain, discomfort. How is the horse coping in their world? Do they have their best life to live when they're not training? So outside of training, do they have a wonderful time? Because if those things aren't being met, we cannot expect our horses to come into training and do anything. We really just can't. Any animal, human, all the way through to horses, dogs, cats, parrots, whatever, we cannot expect it. So to begin with, if we've got a horse that's happy to come along with us and we're dropping that food in the bucket, and we increase the distance we move to that bucket, and then we move where we are, until gradually we could be at the back on a set of long reins, and we just do exactly the same thing. We by now are cueing our horse, and I have other episodes that will talk about this a lot, how we build that cue from us walking forwards to it being a verbal cue, because you'll need a verbal cue if you're going to stand behind your horse and you're not going to be using your feet moving forwards as the cue. So we teach the horse over time to walk forwards to the bucket with us behind, off a verbal cue. And then in theory, we can make that distance longer and longer. We can even insert the odd halt within that. We would train that in hand, again, as I've said many times on the podcast, and I'm happy to talk about the little nitpicky bits about that if you want me to again in an upcoming episode. So we're really going to make it super easy for the horse. We're going to create patterns on the ground, in hand, and then we transfer those to long reining, and then we can transfer those to being in our sulky. So the horse knows that at the end of the chain, at the end of the pattern, we have the food. Now, the only way that this differs, if you are really technically very good, is that you can mark moments that you like, and then you can use a forward feeding reinforcement pattern. So for instance, the bucket is 2 horses' lengths away from us. We have a verbal cue that the horse knows to walk forwards, and we, as the horse takes that step from our cue, we say maybe the words bucket, we could click, we could say yes, whatever your marker is, and we go forwards, throw the reins down safely either side of the horse, and go put feed in the bucket. Of course, it's a lot easier if someone can drop that food in for you, but I've had to do most things that I've done with my horses on my own, so I'm pretty resourceful at finding ways of stopping safely and putting the food forwards. But it's about patterns, repetition. You can't go out day one and do all this. It has to be taken over a long period of time. So the only thing that you get a bonus for at the beginning, the very beginning of this, when you're a technical clicker trainer, is that you can mark the exact moment a lot sooner. But even in behavior builder, it doesn't take long for you to be able to put a cue to go to the bucket of bucket, and that horse is going to go knowing that they're going to get their bucket ahead. It doesn't take much, I don't think, for me to work out I could go 1 circuit around a track, I could go a 2nd circuit around a track, and still eventually send that horse to a bucket as a reinforcer afterwards. It's about the way you build the patterns. It's not about the behavior in between. It's honestly about how carefully you build those patterns. So I don't think personally that getting to the end of a sulky race and saying, here you go, now you get some downtime, because they're getting that anyway. Now, I have talked on the podcast also about functional reinforcers. And this, as soon as I heard this question, I started thinking, now, is it functional? Well, of course it's functional, because if the horse has trotted hard and they've done their bit, they get to the end and they would like a break. So functionally, there could be some reinforcement going on from the fact that they get to relax afterwards. Attaching a marker to that, I think, is a much harder thing, and it's a much grayer, stickier, messier situation that we find ourselves in. Now, I'm talking very hypothetically here. I've never taught a horse to do these things. I've taught a horse to be ridden, to be long-lined, and I have taught some real basics in small pony and trap training, but I haven't done anything that involves going around a track. And I have reservations. I have reservations because of the introduction of the excitement. We would think is exciting for us, but for the horse, it's likely to be very anxious building for the horse. So they're going to feel that anxiety rising when they're potentially at these places. So I think for me, it's something you would practice a lot at home before you even consider taking your horse to a track for them to race in any way. So I'm going to be absolutely honest and say I personally not sure that I would want to do this with a horse. Well, I know I wouldn't, because I'm not in any way competitive anymore and I don't feel the need. And I think that the chances are that we could sometimes miss that our horses need a break because we become focused on what we need to do. So I'm hypothetically talking about the potential for us to train a horse to go forwards with some sort of carriage, sulky behind. That means that it is done in a way that's a lot more comfortable for that horse and that they could enjoy the process. Whether we could ever take that to the stress of a competition, I'm going to be honest and say I think it's a very tricky one. I think it's something we need to be thinking about. I think we need to be thinking, are these things fair for horses? And I'm talking from a position of not knowing one bit. Not for many years have I even seen any sulky races. So it's a tricky one, but I've really come on to talk about the hypothetical nature of whether we could train relaxation, a chance to relax, to stop doing the thing as reinforcement. And I'm here to tell you that I think it's quite mucky and I think it's quite difficult to do. There are ways to add positive reinforcement into things. It's no different to a dog running an agility course. It's no different to a horse running an agility course. You know, when I've done that, with the lovely Becky at Little Green Stables. We've taken it from reinforcing each obstacle to eventually being reinforcement right at the end. You don't have to do it that way. People do keep reinforcing as they go. It really depends on your horse and the level that they're at. So these things are all possible. I think the ethical issues for me surrounding any sort of competition as such, where horses have to go out and do things, is the tricky nature of it. So I hope that gives you some food for thought. It was an absolutely great question at getting my mind going, and I've really only just skimmed the surface, but I wanted to say I'm back and I'm going to be doing some more podcasts very soon, and I hope you'll join me for those whenever you get the opportunity. Drop me a line, drop me a message. You can do that via the podcast, wherever you're watching or listening to it, and ask me questions if you have any that you'd like me to address. In the meantime, enjoy your horses, be kind in your training, and I'll see you soon.